Vibha Chauhan and welcome to Chauhan Classes Finder Clear. So today I will explain class 9th Political Science chapter 4, or also you could call it Civics. So our chapter today is Working of Institutions. So working of institutions. So this chapter is considered on the working of institutions. Now you might have been thinking the question here is, what are institutions? Well, institutions are a kind of set of procedures or conduct of procedures to conduct the government in a country, to conduct the political influence in a country. So in this chapter we are going to discuss about the working of the institutions. Now, as all of you know that democracy is not just about that people elect over their representatives. Now there is responsibility. There are many responsibilities over those representatives as well. Now if people have elected them, now there must be some set of procedures by which those representatives have to follow, which they have to abide by. So that's why there are institutions, and constitution is also most of the part of the constitution is about the arrangement of those institutions. And as well in many countries, in every democracy, there are three major key, three major key institutions that are the executive, the legislature and the judiciary. Well, you have been studying about these three institutions since class 6th or maybe 5th, but in this chapter we are going to discuss about in a broader horizon. You will discover more things about these institutions in a broader perspective, and we will take those clues of those previous classes as well. Now executive, as all of you know, that is a body, is a that is institution, you could say, that is for the implementation of the laws, and legislature is responsible for making laws, or you could say that for conducting those laws, and judiciary is for the judicial review, for the validity or invalidity, or to settle any kind of dispute for that law. So these three institutions we are going to discuss in this chapter with a very broader perspective. Now in this chapter we will discuss those previous things, as well as in this chapter we will discover more things about these institutions, about the working of these institutions from different perspectives. So let's start without wasting time with our first topic, that is, how is a major policy decision taken? How is a major policy decision taken? Now if we talk about a law, if we talk about any kind of government order and any law, so how it is taken, how the major laws decisions are taken, let's discuss. First we will see example of it, and then we will discuss about it. So let's continue with our first subtopic, that is a government order. So a government order. Now as I've said that in the topic we are going to discuss about the major decisions, how they are taken. So first let us see an example of a government order. So on 13th of August 1990, a government order was passed, and it was called as an office memorandum. Now this office memorandum had also its own number. You know what, that every memorandum, every government order has its own number. So this office memorandum also had its own number, that was 36012/31/90 gap EST. Now this was the number of government order. Now you could not understand, in higher classes you will understand the meaning of this. So basically it was signed by the Joint Secretary, the Ministry of Personal Grievances, Pensions and Personnel. So this ministry also signed this contract, this government order, as well as a joint secretary. So it was signed by them and it was passed completely. Now in this order, what was the main thing, that in this there was reservations for SEBC. Now SEBC here means socially and educationally backward classes. So for socially and educationally backward classes, there was a reservation of 27% of employment in public employment in civil posts. So there was made a reservation of 27% for those SEBC. Now SEBC, in simple language, you could say that those people who are socially marginalized as well as their lack in education too. So for them 27% of reservation was made. So this was the government order of 1990. Now what was the story all behind it? Let's discuss. So let's discuss with our second subtopic, that is the decision makers. So the decision makers. Now our next subtopic is the decision makers. Now this whole government order was issued on 13th August of 1990. So this big decision would not have been taken, must not have been taken by just a single person. Now there must be many functionaries behind it, many ministers behind it. So who exactly were the decision makers? Let's discuss. So in 1979, let's discuss the story behind all this government order so that we could see the broader perspectives of those three institutions. So in 1979, the government of India appointed the second backward class commission, and it was under the leadership of BP Mandal. So it was commonly known as the Mandal Commission. So Mandal Commission was appointed in 1979, and after that it gave its remote. It submitted its report in 1980 to the government of India. Now its purpose was to check the situations of socially and educationally backward classes, or SEBC, and to suggest some ideas for their advancement. So in 1980 it gave its report, and in that report there were many suggestions for it, and the most important was that there must be some reserve. 27% of government jobs should be reserved for those SEBC. Now after that it gave its report, and after that what happened was that government of India during that time had not implemented it, had not issued any kind of order in that was for that suggestion of reservation of public employment. And after that what happened was that in 1989 there were elections, and in that election there was an opposition party that was known as Janata Dal, and the leader of that Janata Dal was VP Singh. Now VP Singh raised the issue of this SEBC, and that's why he formed a very good government with a majority government in 1991, because after the suggestion, after the submission of the report of Mandal Commission, every citizen of India, many people of India, not every citizen of India, many people, many ministers were asking for the implementation of that reservation policy, but that had not happened, and that's why in the next elections in 1989 the ruling party was deprived. Now an opposition party made the government of India. Now VP Singh for the elections had raised the issue of this policy, of this reservation, and that's why he formed a very good government. And after that when the government was formed, what happened was that the president in his address to the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, to both houses in the parliament, announced for the implementation of that policy of 27% reservation. And after that it was sent to the personal training, that Ministry of Personal Training, Ministry of Public Grievances, Personal and Pensions, and now they were making laws. They were making the policy, and after that at the last moment it was passed in the parliament by a majority, and after that it was implemented. That you could say that it was implemented. It was originally implemented in September of 1993, because during that period when it was issued, and after issuing it there were many issues that raised against it, that were that now when it was issued in the parliament, there were many people who were protesting against it because many of them denied it. Many citizens of India who were not as EBCs thought that their opportunities for their government employment was less now. Now they could be more qualified for that position, but just because of reservation they would not get that position, and that's why many protests were going against it. And then you know what, that whenever there is any dispute, it goes to the judicial system, and since it was a very big matter, it went to the Supreme Court, the highest court of India. So it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, there you know what, that this case was known as Indira Sahani and others versus Union Government of India, Government of India. So that was the name of the case, and 11 judges, the bench of 11 judges heard this case. And after that there was decision that was finally made, and according to it, what was that this policy, this government order was declared as a valid. Now it was not any kind of invalid, it was now valid, but Supreme Court gave some instructions to the parliament, to the government, to make some changes in it, like those well-to-do who were creamy layer, those as EBC who were the creamy layer would not get any reservation. So that was it. And after that, around the first or second week of September in 1993, it was originally applied to the country. So you know what, that a government order, in this we have studied about executive, legislature and the judiciary, and how we have studied, let's discuss. Now we have seen it is an example. Let's see the broader perspectives of it. So let's discuss with our next subtopic, that is need for political institutions. So need for political institutions. Now what happens? We have seen about the government order. Now if we discuss about the government, that what are the purposes, what are the functions of government? Well, there are many functions of the government that you may not be remembered, that may not be remembered by you. Now, well, the main purposes of government are that to collect taxes from the citizens and to use that money for the defense of the country, for the facilities, public facilities. You know what, that if there is road being built in your area, that it is because of the money of the people, the tax that is collected from the citizens of India. So those money are spent for the public well-being or for the country well-being, for the defense of the country. And you know what, the government is responsible for everything in a country, for the arrangement of the country, for the well-being country, the responsibilities as well as the external matters, the relations of India. If you talk precisely about our country, now then the relations of India with other countries, with other neighboring countries and any other countries, how they have to be, it has to be done by the government. Now government is the one who has to pass laws, who has to make decisions for the country. So you could say that government is a kind of a work of a very frustrating, because you know what, that if you want to make laws, if you have to do so much work with so many people, it is not just one person is making laws, that the statement of one person has been going on in the country, but it is there are many people in the government. Government is not one person. So you could say that it is a kind of frustrating work that frustrates people, but it has to be done by somebody, and somebody is the government. Now for that government, there must be some arrangements to set on to conduct the country, to conduct the services in country, and that arrangement is called, you could say, the institutions that we had already discussed in the starting of this chapter. So you could say that institutions are very important for any country, for any democracy. Why so? Because you know what, that if we have discussed according to the government order that we have discussed, Now what we have seen that Prime Minister and the cabinet ministers make decisions, those civil servants together, all the civil servants together implement those, and if any dispute arise, the judiciary is sitting over there. You can go to the judiciary directly and can settle your disputes. So that is the function of institutions. Now first one was executive. Executive is a very simple way you could say, you can understand it. As you have seen, you know what, that government order. Now there must be the signature of somebody, and that signature is from an executive person. Now the body of that government order, what is written in it is by the legislature. And if it is implemented, if you can see it, it is because it is implemented. And if there is any kind of dispute arising, then it would be judiciary. Those who have made it validated, those who have made its constitutionality. That's why you could say that we need institutions. Institutions are important for us. So you cannot just say that institutions are nothing for a country and not for the well-being of a country, because institution is for decision making, you could say arrangement, how to settle everything in arranged order. It is the work of the institutions, and that could be the need of the institutions that could be said. Now our next topic is Parliament. Now Parliament. Now most important thing, you could say that in a legislature most important is a Parliament body. Now what is Parliament? Let's discuss. You might have not considered the facts about the Parliament in our example in the office memorandum. Now in the office memorandum there was nobody, there was nowhere to be seen the word Parliament. There was no one the word shown Parliament. So what was the role of Parliament behind it? Now as well, if there is any government order that had gone up, then it is because of the support of Parliament. So you cannot just say that Parliament did not have any kind of function or role in that government order, because the Parliament is also very important. It conducts, you know what, that government is under the Parliament. Any government cannot stand without the support of Parliament, without the majority support of Parliament, and that's why Parliament is also responsible for the country or important for a country. Now let's discuss what is a Parliament. Parliament is a national assembly where all the elected representatives sit together and make decisions. Now in every country there are two chambers, so you could say two houses of a Parliament, that we will discuss later in this chapter. So a Parliament is a national assembly of elected representatives of a country. Now there may be some different names of different parliaments of different countries. Like for example, if we talk about, we had discussed about the Parliament of Russia in our history class 9 chapter 2, and its name was Duma Parliament. So the Parliament of Russia is called Duma, and the Parliament of Japan is called National Diet, and the Parliament of Afghanistan is known as Soda. So there are different names, and the Parliament of India is known as Sansad. You know that Sansad, that is in Delhi, New Delhi. It is in the New Delhi. So you could say that is our Parliament of India. And we had also discussed about the Parliament of Germany in our class 9th history. That was Reichstag. So you have to remember different names that you have studied in your history. So let's discuss what we were discussing then. So now we were discussing about the Parliament. Now Parliament have different names according to their country regional names. But Parliament do have some important roles. And what are those important roles? Let's discuss. So let's discuss our subtopic, that is, why do we need a Parliament? So why do we need a Parliament? Now we have discussed about the Parliament, that is National Assembly, but why do we need it? There must be some reasons. Well, Parliament, that is you know what, that every country has its own name of Parliament, and our country has Sansad. Now that is located in New Delhi. Now Parliament, why it is important? Parliament, that is known as in the state level, it is, we are talking about the central government, union government, and that's why we are talking about the parliament. But in the state level, it is called as the state legislative assembly, or that is also called as Vidhan Sabha. So that is about the state level that we will not discuss in this chapter. So let's discuss about the parliament. Why we need the parliament? There must be there some reasons. Well, parliament is the highest forum for the debate and discussion with any issue related to anything for the country, and it can seek any information for any matter. Now, other thing is that Parliament has the right to make laws, to replace any existing laws, or even abdicate them, even about them. You know what? Then even suspend those, delete those rights or laws. So Parliament has that power to make, replace, or delete any law of existing or make any kind of new laws. Now Parliament also has the power of money. Now all the money of the government, all the money that is collected by the people can only be used only by the asset of the parliament in most of the countries, and there must be some report for the uses of that money by the government to the Parliament of India. So that is in our country. So you could see that parliament, you know what, that if there is government that we have elected, but that government might do something very big that is not appropriate for the people, and that's why you could say that from a point of view, parliament, the government is under the supervision of the parliament, and that's why you could say that we need parliament. There are many reasons that may not be given in your book, but you must know. So you know what, that we have discussed four major reasons for why we need parliament, and also we had discussed about this in our class 8 civics, about there was a chapter that was why do we need a parliament. So you could also see it. Now that was also very important. So you could say that parliament, we need parliament for different purposes, for different many things, because parliament is the main body, highest body you could appeal to, you could say, and all the law making decisions are in that body, in that National Assembly. All the representatives of people, elected representatives of people are there, and we call them MP, Member of Parliament, as we had discussed in the previous chapter. So now our next subtopic is two houses of parliament. So two houses of the parliament. Well, there is parliament in almost every country. And in modern days, what is happening, that parliament is divided into two houses, into two, you could say that even in smaller bodies or in a group of people. Well, it is called as chamber or houses. In India, it is called as houses. So in India, there are two houses. That is, first is Lok Sabha and next is Rajya Sabha. Lok Sabha, that is house of the people, and the Rajya Sabha means council of the state. Well, Rajya means state and Sabha means a kind of council or group. So that is called as our council of states. Well, every chamber or house in any parliament, there are two houses in that parliament, and in our parliament, Lok Sabha, that is directly elected by the people. All the MPs of the Lok Sabha are directly elected by the people of India, while the members of Rajya Sabha are not directly elected by the people of India. They are elected by the MLA of states. So if you want any MP from any region, now MLAs of that state would give him vote, and then only he or she can become an MP or MP of Rajya Sabha. So that's it. Well, Rajya Sabha, that is called as the upper house, and the Lok Sabha, that is called as the lower house. Now you might have been thinking that Lok Sabha does not have that much power as Rajya Sabha does, but this is just an old way of speaking, and also Constitution does not mention it. So you could say that in reality this is just an old way of speaking. In actual, Lok Sabha has more powers than Rajya Sabha. Well, how? Let's differentiate them. Well, even if we see the capacity, how many members are there in those Sabha, in those councils or houses, you could say that in Lok Sabha or in the House of of the people, the major capacity, the most number of people are 543 plus 2. 543 that are elected, we had seen in the previous chapter, and 2 that are nominated by the President of India. While in Rajya Sabha, this capacity, you could say that this maximum number of people, members of parliament, is 233 plus 12, where 233 that are elected by the MLA and 12 are nominated by the President of India. So you could say that, well, there is difference, well, there is a very big difference in their number of people as well. And if we see the term of those sabha, if we see the length of term of those sabha in years, Rajya Sabha is for 6 years and Lok Sabha is for 5 years. Well, in 5 years it would change and Rajya Sabha would change in 6 years. But if we talk about the permanent or dissolvent, you could say, well, Lok Sabha is dissolvent. That means it keeps changing in every 5 years. But Rajya Sabha is not like that. It is not completely dissolvent at just one time, just as Lok Sabha does. Because in Rajya Sabha there is a concept of 1/3. Well, in every 2 years, if we see the 1/3 of 6 years, in every 2 years what happens that 1/3 of the member of Rajya Sabha are replaced by new members, and again in the next 2 years 1/3 again will be replaced and now new members will be added, and again after 2 years, while there will be 6 years completely, again the last remaining 1/3 will be replaced with the new members. So now the Rajya Sabha is not completely dissolvent, it's not completely replaced, but by 1/3 policy. So you could see that you could say that there is difference between them. Well, we were discussing which Sabha was more powerful. Well, basically Lok Sabha is more powerful than Rajya Sabha. Well, how? Let's discuss them. You know what, that for the election of Prime Minister, for electing the Prime Minister, as you know that for the Prime Minister there must be a majority of Lok Sabha, not Rajya Sabha. So Lok Sabha is a house from which the Prime Minister is chosen, and also from its support, from its majority only, the Prime Minister can stand it. Also, if you know what, that if there is any bill, it has to be passed. But if there is any kind of mistake in it, there is no agreement between the two houses, then there would be a joint session. Now that joint session from both houses or chambers, members would come. Since Lok Sabha has more members, so more members will be represented from the Lok Sabha, and that would be in the favor of Lok Sabha, and that the power has not been given to the Rajya Sabha because of its less number of people. And also, if Lok Sabha, you know that money powers are within the Lok Sabha of our parliament. Well, if Lok Sabha presents any budget for our country, Rajya Sabha has no right to stop it. Only it can delay it for 14 days and can give some suggestions, but those suggestions may or may not be followed or considered by the Lok Sabha. So Lok Sabha has extremely more power than the Rajya Sabha, you could say. Because why is so? Because the Lok Sabha's elected representative is elected directly by the people of country, by the people of India, and that's why. And there are many other rules, and there are many other powers that have been with the Lok Sabha but not with the Rajya Sabha. So you could say that we have discussed about the two houses of the parliament, but still the parliament is not composed of just these two houses. There is still one more member, and that is the President of India. Well, the President of India is also a member of Parliament. He or she does not belong either to Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, but he is a free party. So you could say that for passing any bill, you need the assent of the President of India, and that's why he is also a member of our Parliament, and then only our Parliament is full, complete component. These are the components of our parliament. Now our next topic is political executive. So political executive. Now in the case memorandum, what we had seen that those officials who had signed the paper or that order were not the originally who had made the decision of that order. Also, we had seen that the Prime Minister, we noted that Prime Minister gave his gave his agreement to that order, gave his signature to that order, said yes for that order, but in reality it was because of Lok Sabha. So he was only executing the wishes, the laws of Lok Sabha. So in this perspective, you could say that the government that we talk about is just executive. Now executive is in charge of the execution of all laws, because what we are saying is just correct, perfect for it. Well, in the case of office memorandum, we had seen that those officials had just signed it, they were just executing it, were not making that decision, and that's why they are the executive part of our institutional arrangement. And all the government that we talk about is just executive institutions. And let's discuss more about executive in a broader way with our next subtopic, that is political and permanent executive. So political and permanent executive. Now let's discuss about the executive form in a broader way. Well, executive is that form of government, is that institution which is responsible for the executing, as all of you know, that executing of all decisions that are taken by the legislature. But here one thing is to be considered. Well, there are two types of executive. There can be two broad categories or two division of, you could say, two types, that are permanent and political executives. Well, political executives are those leaders, are political leaders that are elected by the people. You could say that political executives are the ministers of the government, because they are elected by the people and have become the part of executive government. So they are political executive, and also they have become that political executive for a limited time of period. You know that they have their own terms of government, own terms of office with very limitations. And whereas on the other hand, there is permanent executive. While permanent executive are those, you could say, the civil services. Civil services are under the permanent executive, and those who join the civil services are known as civil servants, because they are the kind who serve the civil society of our country. So they are known as civil servants. And despite the ruling party, even if the ruling party changes, which government is forming, which is reforming, it doesn't matter. Any kind of reform, any kind of change impact on the civil servants. So they are a kind of permanent executive that cannot be replaced by the ruling party, you could say that, by the elections, because they have become the civil servants with passing the tests that is conducted by different commissions. Well, many of you, many of you are also maybe trying for that. So there are two types of executive, political and permanent executives. Now if we discuss about their roles, what are their roles? Well, if we see that civil servants, the permanent executive, what it has actually to do is that you could say that it could give some routes to some suggestions to the political leaders, political executive, but the main thing to be decided is by the political leaders, by the political executive, because those political leaders have much more power than that civil servant. Why it is so? Because you might be thinking that those civil servants are way too far knowledgeable, way too far, have so much knowledge, have so much, they are kind of experts, and also they have experience, and they are educated, more educated, but the ministers, as all of you know, that are not that much literate, not they have that much knowledge about their own field. So why it is so? Why the ministers are given more power than a civil servant? Well, because they represent the people of India. As everybody of you know that, everybody knows that civil servants are not elected by the people, but they have come to the post by passing exams, different kind of exams, test competitions. But whereas on the other hand, ministers, they are elected by the people, directly elected by the people, and that's why major power rests within him, rests within the ministers. As you know that if there is finance minister does not have that much of knowledge about economics that the secretary of finance department does. So you could say that those are experts. Their main work is to give roots to the political leaders, or you could say that political executive, but with a very broad views, the destination has to be chosen by the political leaders, by the ministers, by the political executive. So that we have discussed about the executive structure of our country. Well, we have seen that there are two types of executive. First is permanent and second is political, and political is bestowed with more power. But you know what, let me tell you that in reality, in the ground reality, what happens is that what happens, most of the laws that have to be made are prepared by the civil servants. Most of the work is done by the civil servants. Only the assignment, only the signature of minister is responsible, is important for them, and then that law has to be implemented. That has to be done. Just in the case of Prime Minister, you know what, that Prime Minister is the one who actually does work for the country, but he still needs the signature of President, and that same happens here in the case. So that we have discussed about the executive. Now our next subtopic is Prime Minister and Council of Ministers. So Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. Well, Prime Minister, who is the head of government, not head of the state, but head of the government. And also, you know what, that he is a very important political institution. But yet, he should have, you know what, that we don't elect the Prime Minister directly as we have seen in the previous chapter, but he is or she is appointed by the President of India. Well, the President of India cannot appoint anyone as the Prime Minister of India. He can only appoint a person who is from a party, from a majority party that has made, from a party or the coalition party that has made the majority in the parliament. As everybody of you know that what happens in the elections, actually we had discussed in the previous chapter that whichever party makes has more MPs in the parliament, in the Lok Sabha parliament, then only his party or the coalition government can have a leader to be the Prime Minister of the country. So that happens in the case of Prime Minister. Well, after the appointment of the Prime Minister, there are appointments of other ministers. Well, those appointments are also appointed by the President. Well, the President also appoints those ministers, but on an advice of the Prime Minister. And after that, different ministers are appointed from the ruling party, from the party which has made majority in the parliament. And after that, you know what, those ministers are known as the Council of Ministers, and they are in the number of around 60 to 80 ministers. But there is inner ring of Council of Ministers. You have to understand that those are the Council of Ministers of all departments of health, finance, economic, defense, and all those departments, education, all those departments. But there are still many major departments, and those ministers of those major departments have their own meeting that is called as the cabinet meeting. So that is the inner ring of Council of Ministers, because all those people cannot have a meeting at just the same time, because they don't have, you know what, that they do have their own precious time, and that's why it is not possible for everybody to make a meeting just at the same time. And that's why there is an inner ring of a council of ministers, that is the cabinet ministers. Well, there are still very few ministers that are the cabinet ministers. Their number is 25, and whereas the ministers in the council of ministers is 60 to 80. So the major departments minister are only included in that. And the minister of independent states are in charge with the small ministries. Those leaders are in charge with the small ministries, and they are only invited if they are invited in the council of minister assembly, in the council of minister meeting, then only they can go to that meeting, otherwise they can't go. So only with an invitation. You know what, that because it is a matter of central government, not the state government, so it cannot interfere it. So that is about the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. Now there is an inner ring of Council of Ministers, that is the Cabinet Ministers. You know what, that there are many Cabinet Ministers that you might have seen in your television channels, news channels. So that is the same thing that we have discussed. And those are from the ruling party, not those opposition party or those who don't have that much majority in the parliament. And if there is no majority of any alliance, of any party, singular party, of any candidate, then what happens is that the president appoints that person who is the majority, who is nearly to be the majority in the parliament, and then he would be declared appointed as the Prime Minister of India. And also the oath of Prime Minister is administered by the President of India. And you know what, that if there is coalition government, as all of you know that we had discussed, coalition government is a form of government in which, you know what, that if there is unity, there are many parties who join each other and their seats are joined each other as well when they win their elections, and their government will be formed, and a leader from that government, from that coalition, would come up and would become the Prime Minister, any post they were fighting for. So that government doesn't stand that much powerful, because that leader, that Prime Minister of coalition government, has to listen to his other leaders, to his other colleagues of coalition government as well, and that's why coalition government is not that much powerful, you could say that. And we have discussed about the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. Now our next subtopic is powers of the Prime Minister. So the powers of the Prime Minister, well, we have discussed about the executive. Now comes the powers of our Prime Minister. We have discussed about the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. Well, what about the power of Prime Minister? You know what, that Prime Minister, he is the head of the government, not the head of the state, but head of the government. That means all the ministries are bound to him. The Council of Ministers, you know that if he is the Prime Minister of India, of the country, that means he has wide range of powers, as it could be understood. If he quits, if he does resignation, or if he quits his cabinet, then all other cabinet ministers also have to quit their jobs, quit their positions, and he is responsible. He has power to distribute and redistribute the ministries to any ministers, to any leader of his party, of the majority party. So you could say that Prime Minister ultimately has so much power, wide range of powers, and you could say that a very important person for India, as you could say that all the laws, because we need the president's assent, president's signature on the paper, but on the ground reality, the work that has been done is by the Prime Minister to see everything in the country, to organize the country, to maintain the facilities in the country, to maintain the justice, everything in the country. The Prime Minister is responsible for that, and you could say that every decision, for every idea is by him, but just he needs the assent of the president. And he also you could say that there are different views, different opinions of ministers of different departments, but to make them united, to strengthen them, it is a responsibility of Prime Minister. Prime Minister concludes all the decisions of the cabinet meetings, because he is the one. He can also call a meeting, a cabinet meeting. Only he can call a cabinet meeting in the cabinet council of ministers, and it is his, that in the council of ministers, he is the leader of that council of ministers. So it is obvious that all ministers have to listen to him, and all ministers have to work under his supervision, under his demands, you could say that under his supervisions. And you could say that all the ministries have been together because of the Prime Minister of India. So that you could say that it is the power of Prime Minister. You could say that not so much power have been mentioned in our constitution, not that much highlighted, but you could say that if he is appointed by the president, and he has been given a wide range of powers. But just as I've said that in modern days, in modern times, what is happening that the coalition government, coalition parties have made our government in havoc, have making our government worse and worsening. Why is so? Just as I said that because coalition government, if there is a leader who has become the Prime Minister from a coalition, from an alliance of many parties, then he cannot make that much tough decisions. He cannot take any decision on any matter without the consent of his own leaders, of the coalition government, because he would be pressurized by all the parties that have joined him. Those leaders would pressurize him to take decisions. So that is the power of Prime Minister. It depends on how you use it. Well, our next subtopic is the president. The president, the head of the state. Well, here state doesn't mean a kind of Uttar Pradesh or Madhya Pradesh. Here state means, that government always keeps changing, but state does not. State includes everything, our country, any territorial area, you could say that, within sovereign, any sovereign territorial area, that is the state. And you could say that government can keep changing, government can change, but state cannot. So that is the state. So the president is the head of the state, the highest position in India, the supreme commander of all armed forces, the navy, the air force, the army, all the intelligences, all the armed forces, and all the works that have been done are in the name of her, are in the name of president. Well, I'm saying, that she is appointed. She is not elected. The president is not elected directly by the people, but by the MPs of Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. Well, they will be candidate, and if she is elected, then she will become the president of the India. So the president of India, highest title you could say in India. And that she is the one, the president of India is the one who appoints the Chief Justice of India, the High Judges of Supreme Court, High Court, the ambassadors, the election commission chiefs and ministers. She is the one who appoints every one of them. Many leaders are chosen by her. Well, I'm saying she or her using female context because that it is not that female cannot take high positions. Well, if you could think that in history there has been one female president of India, and who was she? You might be thinking that was Pratibha Patel. This is Pratibha Patel. So you could say that we can also use she instead of him. So the president is you could say that the highest position of India, and without his consent, without his signature, no bill can be passed. And every work that has been done in the country is on the name of president. Every law you could say that every decision is on the name of the president. But there is still one thing to be considered, that is that president is not a kind of master of his own will. Why? Because he is bound with the work of council of ministers, with the cabinet ministers. Because if the cabinet ministers have made any decision and have given to the president can only can suggest those cabinet ministers and can deal it. But again, if that bill comes to the president, then he is bound to sign it. So you could say that he is bound to the cabinet ministers. Cabinet ministers can do whatever they want because they have the power according to the constitution. Why? Because we cannot give just the power to one person, and that's why. So you could say that he has to sign. The president has to sign if it is given twice or thrice with the consent, because he can only give some suggestions. It is not his consent. Now you might have been thinking that the president is not the most powerful, but we have to consider the facts that he is responsible for all the external agreements. Everything is done on his behalf, and if he is appointed as a president, if he is taking oath under the Chief Justice, then he must be a responsible person. So you cannot say that president is not powerful, because still president has his own power, and most of this you will discuss in your higher classes. Also we will discuss in your higher classes about this politics. So we have seen the power of president. Well, now in India what happens that there is so much power to the parliament, to the prime minister. We can see that the council of ministers, the cabinet ministers are the highest in India if we see in the ground reality, but prime minister is the leader of them. The prime minister is the highest, but you know what, then so much power has been bestowed upon him that sometimes parliamentary form of government, that is in India, is called prime ministerial form of government. It is called sometimes because most of the power is given to the prime minister, and that is a parliamentary form of government, that is in India. That means there is cabinet, there would not be just one person, all the powers would not be given to the president. But in America, you could take example, there is the presidential system. Well, in the presidential system, the president is the head of state as well as the head of the government. Now, everything is under the president. All the works that are done in India by the prime minister will be done by the president in America, and everything will be done president, because there would not be any kind of prime minister character, very powerful character like prime minister in America. So that is the presidential system, and it is mainly in the Latin America and the ex-Union Soviet countries. So it is not in that much countries. Now, most of the countries prefer parliamentary system as well. So you cannot say that there are just one thing. There are two types of government as well, that are parliamentary and the presidential form. Now we have discussed about our legislature, that is the Council of States, Parliament. We have discussed about the executive, political and permanent. Now the last institution that we were going to discuss in this chapter that is left is next and last topic, that is the judiciary. So the judiciary, well, I think that all of you know that what is judiciary. Judiciary is a code system of any country. All the codes from Supreme Court to the District Court comes under the judiciary system of India. Judiciary is responsible for justice, fairness, to resolve this dispute in the country, and that system is called as a judiciary system. In judiciary system, you could say that in India there are district level courts, then upon higher there are high courts of each state. So high courts are of each state, and then comes the Supreme Court, the highest court of India, that is located in New Delhi. So that is located in Delhi. So you could say that is the highest court of India. And after that, the Chief Justice, who is the highest judge, you could say that Chief Justice is appointed by the President, and he will also give the oath. The oath of President will be administered by the Chief Justice of Supreme Court. So that is the system of judiciary. And just think about the facts of the office memorandum case that we had seen. Well, in the office memorandum, what had happened? What if there was no Supreme Court? And just think, even if there was Supreme Court, what if there were no judges? There were no judges at all, or the advocates. And even if they were, what if there was no fair dispute solution? If there was no kind of any solution that was fair? And even if that solution, what if there was no trust among the people for that fair solution? So that is the judiciary, what is responsible for fairness, justice, you could say. And judiciary's main work is to solve the dispute between citizen to citizen, the disputes between citizens. So you know what, that if there are two people that are fighting over, then there would be citizen dispute solving. And even between the citizen and the state government or the union government, and also among the state governments, to solve the disputes among the state governments or between the state and central government. So that is the purpose of Supreme Court, of all the judiciary in India, not just Supreme Court. Well, Supreme Court, that is a special court in India. Well, it is the highest, so it is special to every citizen in India. And you know what, the Supreme Court has been bestowed with many powers. Like, for example, it has the power of judicial review. Judicial review, which is one of the most important power of Supreme Court. Well, judicial review means that, just think about this, let's suppose if there is a law that has been passed, but there are many questions that have been arising about the validity of that law, about the constitutionality of that law, whether it is constitutional or not. So if there is any kind of questions, then what about? So for the validity of any law, Supreme Court is responsible. It has a judicial review. According to the judicial review, under the judicial review, it can review any passing laws, any ordinances, and can even suspend them, even can erase them. So that is why you could say that is a power of Supreme Court. And that is power called is judicial review. And Chief Justice, just as I said, that he is appointed by the President. All the judges of High Courts and Supreme Courts are appointed by the President. But when they are appointed, they cannot be dismissed so easily. They can be dismissed only for the impeachment, and that has to be passed by the two-third majority of the Parliament Sabhas of both houses. So that would be the case, but it has never happened in Indian history, in the Indian democratic history. So that's the case of our judiciary. We have seen the judicial review, how important it is. And in the next chapter, we will also see about our fundamental rights. While Supreme Court also has a very judicial system in India, also has a very important role in our fundamental rights, because Supreme Court is responsible for protecting our fundamental rights. And if there is any amendment, if there is any law that has been passed, that is our basic right, that it comes under the fundamental right, then Supreme Court can also declare that law as void, as unconstitutional, as invalid. So that depends on Supreme Court. That is the most important. And one of the most important facts of our judicial system is that it is integrated judiciary, where all the High Courts, Supreme Court, District Courts, and even lower courts are integrated with each other. So there is integrated judiciary system in India. So that's it all about our chapter, about our working of the institutions. Well, just as I said in the introduction of this chapter that we were going to discuss about three institutions. We have discussed about the executive, we have discussed, we have discussed about the political and permanent executive. We have also discussed about the legislature, the parliament, the council of ministers, and we have also discussed the judiciary, the body that stands for the justice in India, for the citizens of India. And after this, there is only one chapter that is left, and that will also be covered in the upcoming video. So that's it for this chapter. And this chapter is also very important because most of this chapter parts, that we have not discussed every fact about this chapter, everything, because that has to be studied in higher classes, as we have been studying about this politics from lower classes, so it will be continued to higher classes as well. So this is all about the chapter. I've discussed our topic and subtopic, and that's the end of this video. So thank you very much.